Hi everyone, I'm Isabel Costa, and I'm super excited to be here in Upstream. I'm a software engineer from Portugal working at Globality in London, and I also volunteer as one of the admins for newcomers.org open source community. As an admin, I have to manage the community contributions, projects, and programs we participate in, such as Google Summer of Code and Open Source Hack, which is a project we've created in the community. So what I want to share with you today is what we do in the community to make sure we are beginner friendly and also talk a little bit about some of the challenges we face. But first I want to explain why I think this is important. When I talk about open source with people that I know from communities or friends, I keep hearing the same thing, that they don't know how to start, they don't know where to start. So when I came to this community as a Google Summer of Code student in 2018, I was just like that. I didn't know how to start, where to start. And I was drawn to the community because of how welcoming and relaxed it was. In fact, when I contributed, I was finishing my studies and also I was working part-time. So I didn't have much time to contribute the way that I wanted. However, I tried to contribute in low effort ways, but still impactful. I created a template for the GitHub wiki of the projects. So we had a consistent way of showing documentation. And that helped the admins a lot. And I also compiled some topics for each repository of the organization. I put it on a spreadsheet and then shared with the admins so they could set it up on their GitHub profile. And it was in this community I learned I can contribute in many ways to open source. I continued in this community and participated in the following programs as a mentor and an admin because I felt I could contribute here, that my input was valued, and I could contribute still in the smallest ways and still be impactful. So what do we do in the community today? We are a community that focuses on projects that have an impact, for social good and embodies the mission of anitaB.org, which involves creating opportunities for women to develop their skills, build connections, and reach their highest potential in their careers. The projects we're building at the moment involve creating opportunities for community members to mentor each other. And also we have other projects, one of them which is used, which we will try to use to help us manage our open source programs, which I will talk later. So to work towards a beginner-friendly community, we do a few things that I want to break down into. The communication element, so how do we get the community involved? Projects and issues and the way we manage them, and the open source programs I talked about. So starting with communication. Transparency is such an important part of open source that we try to make use of it to get the community involved. For example, we have open sessions in which anyone can join and discuss topics related to our community. They can join the conversation or just come and listen. And usually these are audio calls, not for any particular reason, but it ends up helping when people have connection issues. Or I also think that it helps for people to feel more comfortable talking when they don't know us as beginners. Nowadays, most of our sessions are project focused, but we do have with less cadence uh, category related sessions. So sessions for design, sessions for documentation, so that people from different areas can discuss the same project within these project related sessions, but also discuss the areas they're most interested in. We sometimes also do ask me or us anything sessions. For example, when I set these up according to my schedule, I usually book 1 hour where I'm in this call, and anyone can drop in and just ask questions about open source in general, my journey, or this community, and I'll try to help in any way that I can. All these sessions are in an open calendar that people can access to, so they don't have to just rely on messages on Zulip when we are starting a session. They can also add to their calendars and know that we are when we're having these sessions. However, we have the challenge of time zones because certain calls are scheduled according to the leaders of those calls. For example, on Sundays, we have a meeting that is best suits the time zone of one of our maintainers that is from Australia. On Saturdays, our co-admin does the design sessions, and it's kind of early for me, but also know, so I don't attend them, but I also know it's a good time from people in India. But this isn't enough. What about people that can attend these sessions? So we try to take notes during these sessions in a shared document, and then we send the meeting summary on the points discussed and some action items and the link to the document on Zulip, which is our main communication channel aside from answering questions on GitHub, in the comments of issues and PRs. This is so that people who don't attend the session, that can't attend the session, can still know what we are talking about there. So being on Zulip allowed us to disable direct messages. We were using another platform before that also actually it had a minimum age required of 16 years old, which excluded our Google coding participants, which are between 13 years old to 17 years old. And also this allowed us to, as I said, disable direct messages, which helps us better manage the code of conduct violations that we might have, right? And avoid inappropriate conversations with minors. There are some exceptions though, where we have private channels, but these are, there's always an admin involved, and it's mainly to talk about logistics of our programs. Also on Zulip, we promote ways to contribute and where they can contribute to beginners and anyone from the community. We also have streams, for example, a stream to celebrate wins from the community. And also sometimes I celebrate, and someone just reviews their first PR or they test their first PR. And I really like this because this quality assurance process we have sometimes is not as easy for people to contribute to that specific part. We also try to keep an open documentation about our processes, FAQs, so that they can learn at their own time. I remember that when I came in, a lot of information from the community that I got was through blog posts. And I got to know more about the community before I felt the courage to actually get involved. Now I want to talk about projects and issues. So we also try to diversify the types of contributions we promote within the community and try to provide ways for people who, regardless their experience, to try to contribute to their area of interest. And this sometimes may help people who perhaps they code, but they would like to contribute in other ways, first just to get their feet wet and get started with open source. So we make an effort to create issues that reflect these different types of contributions, such as documentation, testing, design, outreach. Sometimes we may not create issues related to some of these categories, but we still promote them within Zulip. These categories that I mentioned were inspired from Google coding program, where the task had to belong to certain categories. These are documentation, design, coding, where participants had to be under 17 years old and would contribute to open source. So we create coding tasks, but we also created a task like for quality assurance and testing, where people can follow our process and test pull requests, or they can test deployed versions of the apps and report some bugs. We recently also started moving documentation to Docusaurus and deploy it on GitHub pages with GitHub Actions. And we have decisions open for anyone to contribute. We also have some design sessions that people can contribute with their ideas and maybe create design mocks for us. As an outreach contribution, we often suggest people to blog about their experiences and submit it to our Medium publication so they can share their first experience in open source, how they started contributing, talk about our projects, and also promote them a little bit. And the good thing about this is that it gets the involvement of the community going. And then people can work their way up in the community and eventually contribute more consistently and in bigger ways. And there's some people who revealed that they really like the design part of open source, so they actually are in the community because of that. I also try to not assume the level of expertise of our contributors. I have seen people who follow all the steps to contribute with minimal help, but I've also seen people who are not comfortable yet creating pull requests or reviewing PRs. Another topic is issues. So we make an effort to have at least a certain amount of first timers only issues. And this is so that we can reserve some issues for people who never contributed to that repository. And this is important mainly in the times of high traffic of contributors during, for example, GSOC, where we can reserve issues to say, hey, you never contributed to this project. Here's an issue for you. And so that we don't have the same people contributing over and over again. And it's also important to have a beginner friendly setup. This is something we're trying to improve on, and we are for sure not perfect on it. We have a project that it's easier to set up than other, and we've noticed that sometimes people don't contribute as much to a certain project because it's the most difficult one to set up from the ones we have. Now regarding open source programs. So we have two programs that we created within this community. Open Source Hack, which is 1 month long program where we had the second edition now in April. And basically we follow a little bit of Google Code Instructor where we have issues for outreach, design, documentation, testing, and coding. And we give out certificates to people who manage to contribute at least to one of those issues. And in this way, we help promote the different types of contributions one can do to open source. We also have the Open Source Ambassadors Program, which is a 6-month long program. And in the first edition, we accepted everyone. We wanted to see where people interests lie. And a lot of good things came from it. We got to meet people that they really wanted to contribute to a specific thing, but they didn't feel comfortable before. But however, we also had to manage a lot of beginners that we had in this program. And even though like our mission is to be welcoming to beginners, but then it started to require a lot of work from admins to manage both experienced and not so experienced people in open source. So after that program, in the second edition, we decided to be a little bit more selective so we could groom a little bit more ambassadors so they could help us help beginners. Um, so in this program, I have to say that they do give a lot of work and we really need people to help us here. And also considering that most of the people who are in this community, not all, they're volunteers. Also, the majority of admins, including myself and my other co-admin, we are volunteers. So sometimes we have to scale back on these programs, and we've did that before. For example, with projects that we had to archive because we didn't have sufficient maintainers for it. We also have about 6 active repositories, and we could not manage these without these volunteers from the Open Source Ambassadors Program, and also mentors that mentor during these shorter 1-month programs. And they help us definitely keep this community beginner friendly. Also when admins aren't that present, right? So admins can focus on the bigger picture of the community. So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, have a really good day.